$3.7 million in federal grants went to creating a broadcast to live stream eclipses. $2.1 million in federal funding went to teach sex education to Ethiopian prostitutes. $671,000 of taxpayer money went to a medical study to see if Tai Chi alleviates stress and cures depression in senior citizens. $210,000 of our tax dollars was spent to study if using Facebook would stop lesbians from drinking too much alcohol. Hello, my friends. I've been thinking, do our politicians even know what US Americans want them to accomplish in politics? Our laws have been needing a serious update for a long time in all three levels of government: federal, state, and local. God establishes governments, and the US government is unique in that it is a democratic republic in which the citizens have a say in how our government is run and what laws our elected officials should legislate. I believe that US citizens have been blessed with not only a privilege, but a responsibility to participate in politics. I think each and every single one of us should be as informed as we can be over as many subjects from as many angles as possible to create the most effective, fair, and cohesive system for the well-being of all citizens in society. I looked at multiple policy center think tanks and research organizations such as, but not limited to, the America First Institute, American Action Forum, American Enterprise Institute, Americans for Tax Reform, Bipartisan Policy Center, Cato Institute, Center for American Progress, Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, Citizens Against Government Waste, Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, Concord Action and Coalition, Congressional Budget Office, Council of State Governments, Economic Policy Institute, Foundation for Economic Education, Guttmacher Institute, Hamilton Project, Heritage Foundation, Hoover Institution, House Committee on the Budget, Independent Institute, Manhattan Institute, Milken Institute Review, Mises Institute, National Association of Counties, National Conference of State Legislatures, National League of Cities, National Taxpayers Union Foundation, New America, Niskanen Center, Peter G. Peterson Foundation, Progressive Policy Institute, Reason Foundation, Senate Committee on the Budget, Tax Foundation, Tax Policy Center, Taxpayers for Common Sense, the American Prospect, Urban Institute, and the U.S. Government Accountability Office. I've compiled what I believe to be the most comprehensive list of over 200 America First policy reforms. I believe these policies set up the best social and economic conditions to form a more perfect union, promote the general welfare, and secure the rights of every individual citizen that make up our nation. We are going to speed run through them now. Try to keep up, and at the end, let me know which policies you agree and or disagree with and why. Here we go. Food and diet. Agriculture. Adopt the same food standards, or at least the philosophy that European countries strive for. European countries enforce a precautionary approach, restricting substances until proven safe, whereas the US holds a risk-based approach, allowing any ingredients into our food supply until they're proven harmful. Require all ingredients that are considered food additives, generally recognized as safe substances, color additives, and other ingredients that have went through any form of processing to undergo FDA review and approval. Re-examine all prior accepted artificial ingredients to find any of which that may be found toxic or unsafe today and ban them. Support efforts such as the Toxic Free Food Act. Umbrella terms in ingredient lists such as natural flavors should be replaced by a disclosure of origin class, which would include categories such as plant-derived, animal-derived, with a subcategory of insect, mammal, and fish, microbial-derived, and synthetic, meaning non-biological. These disclosures would be triggered when certain classes apply, such as insects, shellfish, mammals, and GMOs. For example, if a product contains crushed cochineal insects used as a red color dye, rather than labeling it as a natural flavor, it should read on the ingredients list as natural color, animal-derived, insect. Overhaul product ranking system and reform all the grade A, grade B nonsense. Eliminate at least half of all farm subsidies. Redirect the rest of the funding to struggling farmers instead of the rich and well-off corporate farms. $171 billion annual cost, $85 billion annual savings. Reduce overloaded regulations on agriculture and aquaculture to decrease compliance costs for most farmers. Estimate a decent reduction of about 25%. $386 million annual cost, $97 million annual savings. Let the aim of ending hunger be focused on U.S. citizens first. Food surplus must be utilized and provided to Americans in schools, outreaches, and even prisons. Hunger in the U.S. must end before we start feeding people in other countries. Digitize SNAP eligibility and fraud detection by implementing real-time income verification using IRS and state wage data, and national EBT analytics to accelerate processes and flag anomalies automatically. Expand antitrust enforcement in meatpacking by increasing Packers and Stockyards Act enforcement staff, supporting reforms such as the Meat and Poultry Special Investigator Act, and require mandatory price transparency in reports from large processors. Cut in half, if not eliminate entirely, the USDA Market Access Program, which is a redundant government program that helps corporations sell their products to other markets. $200 million annual cost, $100 million annual savings. Improve school nutrition by setting higher standards, providing more whole foods, decreasing added sugars, and promoting fresh cooked over microwaving processed meals. Eliminate the USDA sugar program, which subsidizes the U.S. sugar industry. $1 billion annual savings. Restrict SNAP benefits to cover only grocery staples such as fruits, vegetables, meats, dairy, bread, water, and cereal. Ban processed junk food and soda beverages from SNAP benefits. Regarding animal rights, we should strive to ban or at the very least severely limit the chemical, cosmetic, food, drug, and safety testing on animals. Why do greedy drug corporations want animals to suffer? Well, the truth is that they don't. Corporations don't want to use animals for testing because they are in fact terrible test subjects. Many drugs that are safe for animals are dangerous for humans, and vice versa. The reason corporations use animals is because the federal government forced them to before they are allowed to move forward with human trials. Corporations prefer to use other methods such as in vitro testing, organs on chips, computer modeling, microdosing in humans, and other clinical methods. But even though the FDA Modernization Act 2.0 of 2022 removed the federal requirement that drugs should be tested on animals before human trials, allowing alternatives to be used instead, most corporations and laboratories are heavily accustomed to the testing on animals, and a large industry for animal testing is deeply rooted because of government overreach. More than 110 million animals in the US are physically abused, surgically experimented on, chemically tortured, and mercilessly killed every year thanks to politicians not having enough brain cells to realize that there are over a dozen other ways found in the private sector to test makeup products. Regarding the health of the land, we should expand efforts to improve soil health, reduce soil loss, and become more proactive in sharing sustainable agriculture methods among all farmers. Legalize and promote salvage grocery stores. These stores acquire or purchase food items past their expiration date from traditional stores at a discounted rate, which they then sell at a cheaper price. Notable exceptions would apply, such as prepared deli products and baby formula. Promoting policies for grocery stores that relax cosmetic standards, mark down products while increasing volume of sales, repurpose food into meals, donate to nonprofits, feed animals, and create local compost are all great. 40% of all food goes to waste. If this can be prevented, we could save approximately $470 billion worth of wasted food every year and guarantee the complete and total elimination of food insecurity in the US forever. Through these healthy reforms, we will lower rates of obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and many other chronic illnesses. This will dramatically reduce healthcare spending, create stronger and localized food economies, and skyrocket food literacy and consumer autonomy. Economic development. Commerce. Reduce, if not eliminate, most, if not all, corporate subsidies by at least 75%. Conversely, investing in public goods such as education, infrastructure, and healthcare will attract and aid businesses more effectively than targeted subsidies. $181 billion annual cost, $136 billion annual savings. Ease manufacturing regulations to reduce compliance costs, $350 billion annual cost, by at least 10%, and then reform the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program, $175 million annual cost, to direct most funding towards research and development and possibly double the program's budget, $34.7 billion annual savings. Reduce business regulations and simplify what's left to decrease production and service costs. Reduce the Economic Development Administration funding in half, $468 million annual cost, $234 million annual savings. At the very least, delegate many of the services and grants to other existing agencies and departments. Redefine, restructure, and simplify the categorization of corporations and business types to decrease the corporation's deflection of liability and increase corporate responsibility through safety outcomes rather than superfluously strict regulations, and increase legal protection for individual employers. This should shift liability from employees, including executive officers, more to the corporation itself. This will decrease the fear of personal litigation from attempting risky innovation. Don't misunderstand. This does not mean that employees should be free from liability. Rather, the most effective system is to use layered liability with corporation as the default defendant. Employees protected for good faith actions, executives protected unless they knew or should have known of the misconduct, ignored the red flags of business, or personally benefited from malpractice. Criminal liability remains personal, and regulators should retain the power to bar repeat offenders from leadership positions. Introduce German-style co-determination, requiring companies with 500 to 2,000 employees to elect representatives that make up at least 1/3 of the board of directors, and companies with over 2,000 employees would have employee-elected representatives making up 50% of the board of directors, with the shareholder-elected managing director to have one extra vote to maintain fairness for the shareholders. This would guide corporations away from profit-oriented short-termism towards family-oriented long-term goals. Introduce the Australian-style two strikes rule, which allows shareholders to influence board decisions on executive salaries. If more than 25% of shareholders reject the company's remuneration report, the company receives its first strike. A second rejection in the following year triggers a spill meeting, where shareholders can elect new board members, excluding the managing director. This expands accountability and aligns executive pay with shareholder interests. Simplify small business export assistance by creating a single export portal instead of multiple overlapping offices. Eliminate ghost job advertisement by legislating accountability in job postings, requiring listings to be time-bound, and increase transparency in hiring outcomes. Support legislation such as Truth in Job Advertising and Accountability Act. National defense. War. Track and destroy all anti-American terrorist organizations. Designate all drug cartels and dealers, foreign and domestic, that have ties with illegal drug trafficking in the U.S. as terrorist organizations, with the focus of wiping them off the face of the planet. Estimated annual savings range from as low as $232 billion up to $2.7 trillion. Hunt down and bring to justice all illegal arms dealers in the U.S. Hunt down and imprison all organized human traffickers in the U.S. Hunt down and exterminate all child sex traffickers in the U.S. Repeal the military draft or make it equal opportunity, meaning able-bodied women along with the men should be subject to the draft. Equal rights, equal fights. Procurement reform. Set a limit to cost-plus contracts, require fixed price milestones, and enforce penalties for chronic overruns. Expand upon the Pentagon's acquisition reform plan. Carefully eliminate federal funding for the beach replenishment program by delegating the financing to the state and local governments. I mean, why should someone in Kansas, Nebraska, or Colorado be financing projects that only apply to coastal states such as California, Texas, and Florida? And this is coming from someone who lives in Florida. $289 million in annual savings. Modernize Cyber Command. Clarify offensive and defensive cyber systems and improve civilian-military integration, expanding on the Pentagon's Cyber Force generation model known as Cybercom 2.0, and utilize U.S. Cybercom with individual military departments. Slash waste and fraud within the Department of War, targeting failing projects, bloated nuclear budget, unnecessary overseas military bases, overpriced defense contracts, and reducing private military personnel contractors. $100 billion in annual savings. Education. There are 55 million K-12 students in the U.S. Current average spending per student is $20,000, totaling $1.1 trillion. The federal government funds 11%, $120 billion, of nationwide spending, or $2,500 per student. Due to high education costs, we should utilize school vouchers, providing parents greater accessibility and freedom to choose the school their children can go to. Reduce the burden of administration on schools by removing duplicative and unnecessary compliance requirements, as well as delegating greater authority to teachers in making decisions. Support and retain teachers by offering competitive salaries, mentorship programs, and reducing class size per teacher, something along the lines of 10 students per teacher rather than the current 15 to 20 students per teacher. Eliminate, merge, and prevent duplicate education programs, $20 billion in annual savings. Model education systems based on Finland and Mississippi. This model includes measures such as establishing 2 sessions of recess, each lasting 30 minutes, eliminating homework, eliminating standardized testing, banning Common Core education techniques, focus on early literacy, implement phonics-based instruction, and require strict accountability for student performance. Adjust education in grades 1 through 8 to focus on teaching students the basic knowledge for mental function and increase their understanding of reality and society, English, science, social studies, a basic course on laws, and mathematics. Restructure education in grades 9 through 12 by placing a stronger focus on career direction and adult independency by promoting courses such as commerce, financial literacy, social psychology, and political science. Enact a basic food literacy program in public education. Mandate cooking safety and nutrition curriculum in high school. Prohibit AI and technology in general from replacing teachers. AI and other technological tools may be used as helpful instruments, but not as a replacement to teachers. However, I lean on the side that students should not be allowed to use technology in elementary and secondary schools. Teach media literacy to students to identify fake news, misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda. Teaching how to read charts and graphs on top of understanding the many ways to interpret statistics and variability. Enforce for-profit accountability in colleges by linking eligibility to earnings outcomes and debt-to-income metrics. Expand the gainful employment rule. Increase data transparency by mandating reporting of enrollment, program costs, and student career outcomes to help students make informed decisions. Innovate and increase funding for libraries. These incredible places offer more than just books. I think the library is the most important third place in our fast-paced modern age. Stop and eliminate all federal government student loans. Allow students to take out regular bank loans for education. Or another practical solution would be to simplify student aid by consolidating multiple loan and grant programs into fewer options with strict terms, applying only to STEM fields and teaching degrees for elementary education and STEM-oriented secondary education, rendering inapplicable to the humanities and liberal arts, meaning no student loans for programs and degrees such as, but not limited to, literature, languages, history, philosophy, religious studies, social science, gender studies, sociology, psychology, economics, political science, anthropology, communications, fine arts, music, drama, design, photography, creative writing, business finance, marketing, management, and law. This will help millions of US citizens from making the foolish and stupid choice of taking on tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt with tens of thousands of dollars in future interest payments for a useless degree in trans-lesbian drama theater theory. McDonald's will not pay enough to cover your debt, and if you think taxpayers should pay for your stupid financial decisions, then you just gave another reason why you should not get a student loan. Require colleges to create programs that bridge students to apprenticeship and careers either through portals for job opportunities or teaching job search and resume application writing. Energy. Eliminate carbon credits, because they're ultimately useless. Reward energy ideas that substitute gas and oil such as hydrogen and ethanol. Expand research and development in energy storage beyond lithium-ion. Promote and expand nuclear energy programs across all states. Help fund workforce training through paid apprenticeships in power grid, nuclear, and HVAC trades. Modernize and expand the power grid as well as integrating within the system the capacity to utilize solar, wind, and hydroelectric renewable energy resources. In this way, we can stop buying oil from foreign countries, thus eliminate funding towards their terrorist and warmongering regimes. Land, natural resources, and environment. Expand oil drilling to lower the price of gas and to keep gas prices low. Promote reusing plastic grocery bags and utilizing multi-use grocery bags to reduce waste. This is not a ban on plastic bags. This is just a measure to motivate people to reuse what they can. Renovate, if not eliminate, the plastic recycling process to reduce emissions and waste. Most plastic is not recyclable. In fact, almost all plastic is thrown into landfills, even though it's collected by recycle trucks. Improve the auditing process for corporations on waste removal and increase penalties for causing excessive water and land pollution. Expand rapid response teams for invasive species control. Investigate and review the near 370 treaties between the U.S. government and indigenous American tribes to track any violations by the U.S. government through military action, treaty renegotiation under threat of violence, or legal oppression. These historical injustices must be addressed and rectified by one of two methods, either returning land only if it's uninhabited or unused by the federal government, or provide monetary compensation equal to the current market value of land stolen, thus effectively buying the land properly this time. There have been similar cases of advancing this effort, such as the Black Hills Supreme Court Award of 1980, the Cobell versus Salazar settlement of 2009, and the land return in New Mexico to the Zuni tribe in the 1990s. Purchasing the land properly would be more pragmatic than returning it. Also, I am not saying that all U.S. land is stolen. Actually, I would say most of U.S. land was conquered and rightfully belongs to the U.S. However, in cases in which mutually agreed upon land recognition was violated and land was stolen, I believe that it is the U.S. government's and the U.S. American people's responsibility to reconcile with the tribes they have wronged. Healthcare and human resources. Overhaul the entire government-provided healthcare system. A video dedicated to this single issue will be made soon with a detailed explanation as to how this new system would look like. But here's a summarized breakdown. Replace Medicaid and Medicare and all direct-to-insurance company subsidies with U.S. citizen-owned, government-funded, multi-payer, tax-free, universal health savings accounts, with a $5,000 to $15,000 annual cap depending on income, individual or family unit, degree of disability, and past work history. The government will oversee the annual balance of these universal HSAs and will not fund beyond the reached annual threshold. Government would regulate spending access, which would be limited to primary care, outpatient services, prescription drugs, mental health, reproductive care, and insurance premiums and deductibles without restrictions to the kind of insurance plan the account holder wants regardless of where they live in the U.S., meaning they can get insurance across state lines. This eliminates the majority of problems that haunt the current government healthcare system, as well as resolve issues that the current system doesn't even acknowledge. Estimated annual spending, $2.5 trillion. Provide universal catastrophic health coverage. This would provide immediate health care to those who are in a state of emergency. This is so people whose lives are saved in the emergency room won't have to worry about spending the rest of their lives paying off the medical debt. It would be first rolled out for children under 18 and for seniors 65 and older. After some tweaking, the universal catastrophic health coverage should expand to cover all U.S. citizens. Estimated annual spending, $500 billion. Provide better, realistic healthcare systems to those who struggle with substance abuse and obesity. Aggressively enforce the most favored nation policy to require all pharmaceutical drug corporations doing business in the U.S. to reduce their drug prices to the same or lower rate they sell them for in other developed countries. Drug corporations sell their products at a rate that is 300 to 400% more in the US than in comparative nations. This is one of the reasons why pharmaceutical drugs in European countries are cheaper than in the US, because Americans are paying for them. The US funded 1/6 of NATO, 1/3 of global foreign aid, and we are also the ones enabling cheap medicine in their socialized healthcare. Apparently, the United States has enough money for other countries, but not for US citizens. Mandate prices of medical services to be posted and seen clearly and transparently before customers agree to treatments, kind of like a McDonald's menu. Mandate the provision of itemized receipts to medical patients, requiring all hospitals and clinics to provide patients with itemized bills to compare to the explanation of benefits. Require all hospitals and clinics to provide patients with a financial assistance policy. Initiate a New Zealand-style no-fault medical injury compensation system that allows patients injured during medical care to receive compensation without the requirement to prove negligence from a specific individual provider. This reduces courtroom drama, years of legal fighting, lowers administrative and insurance costs, and prevents doctors from being personally targeted in lawsuits, thus giving them greater encouragement to provide better care to their patients. Expand upon safe harbor protections for evidence-based care. Safe harbor laws protect clinicians who follow evidence-based clinical guidelines, removing the presumption of negligence in a legal court. This helps medical professionals to decrease defensive medical practices such as requiring patients to go through many unnecessary tests and procedures, which needlessly raises healthcare costs. These protections give doctors a stronger drive to take appropriate clinical risks and incentivizes clinical guidelines to be updated. Safe harbor protections are needed because bad outcomes can still occur despite receiving the best, most excellent care. Reopen and innovate mental asylums. If you think mental asylums should not return, then you probably belong in one. Repeal the effects of the lobbying efforts of the American Medical Association in the Balanced Budget Act of 1997, which reduced the number of medical schools, capped federal funding for residencies, and cut a quarter of all residency positions for medical students, all of which created a severe shortage of physicians and other medical personnel, resulting in medical care becoming unbearably more expensive. Thank you, government overreach. Reform the Medicare Part D non-interference clause so that the U.S. government can negotiate drug prices. Reform the Medicaid drug rebate program, either by overhauling the system or possibly eliminating it altogether. Eliminate contraceptive services from Title X Family Planning Program, while not touching STI services, reproductive health services, and sexual health counseling. $286 million annual cost, $10 million estimated annual savings. Restructure the adoption system and foster care to make it more affordable and accessible. States should not be blocked from investigating subsidy fraud. Bureaucratic red tape and overbearing requirements for housing, legal and medical clearances must be significantly reduced and redesigned to more efficient methods. Caseworkers must be supported and empowered with greater data on children in care to improve the process of placement. Furthermore, we ought to improve prevention efforts by expanding programs such as Care Portal to reduce the number of children entering foster care and promoting a strong and united family. We must improve oversight and accountability for adoption subsidies, streamline and modernize the matching process, prioritize mental health care for children in foster care, and increase standards of transparency and public data. There are about 400,000 children in foster care. There are more than 2 million couples waiting to adopt those children. Who's getting in the way of these children uniting with great parents? The government! At this point, I think the US adoption system has legalized child trafficking. There is a ton of fraud and corruption in this industry thanks to the government. But that's a whole different video entirely. Stop welfare from incentivizing the creation and continuance of non-married, single-parent households. This can be done by not focusing the welfare on that demographic specifically, though continue to take it into consideration, but not focusing. Establish work requirements, which may include volunteering for able-bodied persons on welfare. Stop penalizing married couples who are financially struggling by withholding some portion of welfare just because their household income is higher than single income. Welfare should be accorded by individuals within the household and not by household itself. Remove the requirement for employers to offer or provide health insurance to employees, because they pick the most expensive policies and then they offset the cost onto their employees. What incredible consequences. Housing. Reduce government regulations that limit housing supply. Regulations account for 25% of the cost of single-family homes and 40% of the cost of a typical apartment development. The reason housing is so expensive is not because of greedy landlords, even though they do play a small part. The greater guilt falls on government overregulation. Reform the National Environmental Policy Act, as reviews can take years with unnecessary legal challenges, creating more financial risk and developers having to pass delays and legal costs onto consumers. Reduce federal government land ownership by selling federal land to state and local government. About 640 million acres, or 28% of U.S. land, is owned by the federal government. This limits land available for housing near growing cities, and it raises land prices in metropolitan areas surrounded by federal land. Reduce federal-level energy and building standards. The Department of Energy codes and appliance standards unintendedly raises construction costs and negatively affects starter homes. Reduce manufactured housing regulations. The federal standards and financing rules limit innovation, cause loans to be more expensive for manufactured homes, and transportation installation codes increasingly add to the cost. Reform and reduce by 50% funding for the HUD public housing program. $8 billion annual cost, $4 billion annual savings. Limit, if not eliminate, the mortgage interest deduction. You would think this deduction is awesome based on the name that it deducts the interest of your mortgage. But it isn't, because it doesn't decrease the overall price. In fact, it causes home prices to rise by increasing purchasing power, benefiting high-income households disproportionately. And it incentivizes larger, more expensive homes, which hurts middle and lower-income households the most. Reform the SALT deduction of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. The way this deduction was formed in the beginning punishes married couples while benefiting unmarried people who own a home together. At the local level, zoning, density limits, parking minimums, and height caps, among other similar housing regulations, are the biggest drivers to housing shortages and housing prices. Federal regulations only compound local restrictions. Basically, the federal and local housing regulations raises the cost of housing through long delays, legal complexity, and excessive compliance efforts. It reduces supply by increasing risk and lowering profitability. All in all, it disproportionately decreases and prevents affordable housing. National security. Support and strengthen the Department of Homeland Security by providing more labor and resources to protect U.S. borders. Maximize border security through increased surveillance, physical infrastructure, border patrol personnel, and modernizing ports of entry. Deport all illegal immigrants, starting with all those who have committed violent or sexual crimes, and allow deported illegal immigrants who haven't committed violent or sexual crimes to re-enter the U.S. through the proper ports of entry. Any illegal immigrant not guilty of crimes other than illegal residency should be allowed to quickly initiate the naturalization process without being deported. Otherwise, they get the boot. Amend U.S. birthright citizenship to only apply to those born in the U.S. with at least one parent who holds U.S. citizenship. Justice. Prioritize imprisonment for violent criminals and expand diversion and retribution programs for non-violent criminals. I think that a person who has committed murder or rape should receive the death penalty. Some of you may say that that is excessive punishment. My response to that is, mercy to the guilty is cruelty to the innocent. If you agree that killing a murderer or rapist during the act of the murder or rape is justified, then killing them upon confirmed conviction is equally just. In doing so, we can prevent 90% of crimes from happening again. That's millions of innocent men, women, and children protected from becoming victims of these serial monsters. Regarding illegal drug possession and use, reduce prison sentences and fines drastically, if not eliminate them entirely, if the illegal drug user identifies and helps locate the illegal drug trafficker who they purchased drugs from. This will help stop illegal drug trafficking by targeting the source of the problem instead of punishing those who are struggling with addictions. Offer medical rehabilitation services as an alternative to prison. Increase funding for the rehabilitation of incarcerated criminals. Increase police oversight grants tying funding to reforms. Expand compensation programs for victim services. Establish independent audits for prison functions, budgets, and spending. No parole for criminals convicted of violent crimes. Minimum prison sentence for extremely violent crimes in which victims were sexually assaulted or hospitalized should be no less than 5 years, and as for attempted rape or attempted murder, no less than 10 years or longer if the victim is 8 years old or younger, in which case the sentence lasts until the victim reaches 18 years of age. State and local courts should be allowed to go beyond the minimum sentences. The punishment for stolen property should be restitution, in which the criminal should return the stolen property or the value of the property if lost or destroyed, plus additional penalty of at least 20% of the value of the property to the owner. Retribution must be immediate or remitted within a predetermined period of time, or else remitted through prison sentence. Harshen the penalties for false accusations when they are proven to be knowingly false. If it is found that the accuser brought false charges against someone, then the accuser should suffer harsh consequences. However, the punishment the false accuser intended the accused to suffer should not be the punishment for the false accuser. This is because false accusations should be punished not for the intent towards the accused, but by the act of providing the justice system with knowingly false reports and criminally intended allegations. Illegalize firearm bans. Instead, require serious background checks, firearm licensing, and participate in a registry of firearm ownership for specific types of firearms. Gun licensing reform. Different degrees of gun licenses should be required to purchase different kinds of firearms. Gun license requirements may include 1. Clearing a background check without a violent felony in criminal history. 2. Completing a moral psychiatric examination without signs of mental impairment or any violent personality disorder. And 3. Varying measures of firearm training. The degree of the tests should match the degree of the gun license. Illegalize, prohibit, and erase pornography off the internet. Pornography within legal definition is the showing of genitalia without strict and professional approval for educational purpose. If erasure is not feasible, then mandate strict ID age verification. If an adult store across the city requires to see your ID to confirm your age, it should be no different on the internet. Just how a child can't simply waltz right into an adult store, so too should they not be allowed to easily access websites containing adult content. Establish processes in each state and locality for the removal of rogue elected prosecutors via a democratic remedy initiated by citizens. Labor. Reform overtime rules from the Fair Labor Standards Act as it incentivizes employers to engage in wage theft by classifying certain positions as exempt. Change the overtime system from job classification-based exemption status to an hours-based system with a single income cap of $200,000. This means that all workers earn overtime after 40 hours regardless of job title and duties. But overtime pay would not be applicable to employees whose base pay is at least $200,000. A person with a base pay of $200,000 working overtime would earn regular rate for overtime hours. Remove unnecessarily stringent OSHA compliance and reporting rules that increase compliance costs and incentivizes corporations to automate jobs and outsource work. Unnecessary OSHA rules include safety record keeping for low-risk workplaces, data retention requirements, penalties for technical non-hazard violations, overboard training documentation, and frequency of retraining. Eliminate the joint coordination of NLRB and Department of Labor in union-related rules as it discourages expanding hiring initiatives and favors workers with seniority over the younger workforce. Eliminate the federal minimum wage and hopefully states will follow suit. It reduces entry-level hiring, cuts hours, disincentivizes paid apprenticeship programs, and inevitably replaces workers with technology. Instead, utilize co-determination layouts and promote worker rights of wage negotiation. Repeal the Davis-Bacon Act, $21 billion annual savings. Reform the Labor Management Relations Act, aka the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947, by 1. Not allowing employers to interfere with union organizing and elections, and 2. Removing the restrictions of subjects of bargaining. Foreign Affairs. Upgrade all embassy facilities and update security. Shift from extreme risk avoidance to managed risk diplomacy. Reduce diplomatic security movement restrictions and delegate risk tolerance authority to diplomacy chiefs. Increase staffing and digitization to handle visa backlogs. Reduce foreign aid by at least 80%. $82 billion annual cost. $66 billion annual savings. Reduce the government's over-centralization by limiting clearance requirement to more impactful decisions, granting diplomatic chiefs greater discretionary authority. Even though sanctions are coordinated with the Department of Treasury, the Department of State should steer away from sanctions as it hurts civilians more than it hurts governing elites. Also, it just makes the US look like a peaceful bully instead of a diplomatic strategist. Reduce reporting as barely anybody reads the reports. Shift efforts from documentation towards active intervention. Transportation. Expand upon promoting, advising, and approving public transportation in high-density regions. Eliminate the one-size-fits-all federal highway standards and mandatory adherence to AASHTO Green Book regulations. Instead, promote performance-based safety standards, allow states to opt out of outdated road design requirements, and link federal funding not to the width of the road but to safety outcomes. Investigate and revalue Amtrak subsidies, New Start's transit funding, and intercity and high-speed rail grants. Eliminate the Essential Air Service, $587 million annual savings. Significantly reduce the NEPA review process by expanding categorical exclusions for routine projects, impose time limits, encourage innovation, and reward rapid fixes to safety. Reduce funding of the subsidy for Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority by at least 50%. Delegate funding to regional taxes, increased fares, and congestion pricing. $715 million annual cost, $358 million annual savings. Update most four-ways to roundabouts. You will all hate it at first, but you'll thank me later. America made. Listen, I love America way more than the average American, and I'm all for Made in America. However, the insanely rigid Buy American made only is not a good idea because in many sectors of transportation, many American supplies are either limited or don't exist. This causes delays and limits access to innovative measures. We need to shift from American made only to America made first. And if you don't find what you need, then buy non-American made. Establish public project dashboards for cost transparency. Lack of rail safety and the many constraints on innovation can be credited to the FRA. Shift from system safety to crash avoidance standards, adopting fast-track policies. Federal Transit Administration has created a lot of compliance burdens. Reform should lead towards delegating approval authority to the states, emphasizing speed and reliability, and allowing standardized adaptations. Treasury. Update and simplify the tax system, tax forms, and tax guidelines. Obviously, it's Congress that enacts tax revenue by sources and tax rates, but it's the Department of Treasury that determines how these taxes are collected. Enact massive overhaul of the IRS IT systems. Upgrade all IRS computers, update all software, and modernize procedures. Once the federal budget has been balanced and sees a surplus, then over the course of 20 years, we should stop issuing new Treasury bonds, pay off existing Treasury bonds that mature, and slowly pay off the $39 trillion in national debt. Not all of it, but most of it. Why do we need to pay off the national debt anyway? Because American taxpayers are wasting over $1 trillion every year on interest payments alone. We pay more in interest on the national debt than the budget for the entire U.S. military. You think spending $900 billion every year on super soldiers, fighter jets reaching Mach 6.72, and experimenting the brain-melting radio laser discombobulator on Venezuelan dictator guards was excessively expensive? The interest on the national debt is even more expensive. We could have been putting that money towards more important expenditures such as healthcare or education, faster fighter jets, or worst case scenario, building more football stadiums. But now, we're paying for Uncle Sam's wasteful credit card addiction. On top of that, the increasing deficit and national debt is making inflation worse, thus further diminishing the value of the US dollar and stealing the wealth and prosperity of future Americans. The only people who say that we can just print more money to pay it off are either financially stupid or they are so rich they won't be as negatively affected by the extreme inflation of our currency as the working class will. Reform the Deficit Reduction Act of 2005. Adding a box to tax returns to allow voluntary contributions to reduce the national debt. This is to replace the little box that allows voluntary contributions to the presidential campaign fund. Expand emergency and disaster relief funds and further develop plans in case of hurricanes, flooding, earthquakes, and terrorist attacks. Create a federally centralized platform for online federal tax collection with pre-populated forms and a modernized payment interface like we see in the Netherlands, Japan, and France. Maybe we could call it the IRS Direct File. You know, the one that a certain administration got rid of to rely on for-profit tax preparers such as Intuit's TurboTax. Let's bring that back and give it the proper funding and staffing it needs for it to be actually beneficial. IRS Free File Program. Require the IRS to expand the program to all taxpayers regardless of income and simplifying the process. $148 billion in annual savings. Instructions to filing individual income tax Form 1040 is about 125 pages long. Let's simplify the process and reduce the page count for that form and every other form to be no more than 10 pages long. Can we all agree on that? Shorten Title 26 tax code by at least 75%. How many pages make up the tax code right now, you ask? It's estimated to be around 6,900 pages. But when you include federal tax regulations, tax guidance, and legal evaluations to understand and properly interpret the tax code, that number blows up to over 75,000 pages. If you read 200 pages of it every day, it would take you 375 days. That's 1 year and 10 days, just to read the federal government tax code and instructions to pay those taxes. We're not even including state and local tax codes, just federal. It's so complicated that every time you call the IRS, getting a different agent each call and asking them the same question, you will get different answers. Even the tax collecting experts don't know how to collect taxes, and they expect us to navigate their complicated labyrinth and file our taxes accurately? The IRS processes over 160 million tax returns with a rate of error of about 1%. That's 1.6 million taxpayers affected. Many innocent Americans have been injured and committed suicide because the IRS wrongfully assessed immense penalties to them. Cut ties with the International Monetary Fund. This organization has been in some deep doo-doo and has caused more financial harm around the world than Hollywood Jews and Muslim terrorists combined. If you think bankers are evil, the IMF is the demon lord of them all. Require collection of unpaid taxes by federal employees with a penalty of having their employment terminated. $1.5 billion total savings. Expand help centers to assist small businesses with tax compliance. Repeal the 1943 IRS decision to provide tax subsidies to employer-sponsored insurance plans. This IRS tax subsidy incentivizes employers to acquire more expensive insurance policies that raises the cost for employees. If it wasn't for the federal government overreach, insurance policies would be a lot cheaper. Move away from Keynesian theory economics towards Austrian theory economics. Print currency at a rate 90% less than now and link the dollar either to gold or silver. Veteran affairs. There are about 18 million veterans in the US. Many of them are ignored in today's culture. Reform should include expanding preventative and specialized care as well as investing in telehealth and local clinics, thereby expanding proactive outreach for suicide prevention. Reduce bureaucratic processing inefficiencies such as eliminating claim overdevelopment, updating electronic systems, securing IT infrastructure, and reducing administrative delays. Reinforce clear non-discrimination principles for VA patient care. Expand cooperation with private sector care, supporting programs such as Mission Act's Community Care and the Access Act, letting veterans choose health providers whether private or public through the VA. Independent federal agencies. Promote election integrity through the Federal Election Commission by cleaning voter rolls prior to elections, which would prohibit unauthorized persons and dead people from voting. Requiring photo identification and prohibit government from accepting private money from individuals and third parties to conduct elections. Eliminate the Presidential Election Campaign Fund, $25 million in annual savings. Eliminate the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, $59 million in annual savings. Delegate more federally funded social responsibilities to state and local governments, thus bringing federal agencies and decision-making closer to the people at the state and local levels. We could start with the oversight functions of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. Reduce EPA subsidies for local water infrastructures by half. $10 billion annual cost, $5 billion annual savings. Cut the National Endowment for the Arts grants in half. $220 million annual cost, $110 million annual savings. Cut the National Endowment for the Humanities in half. $206 million annual cost, $103 million in annual savings. Reduce the power or possibly dismantle the NSA, National Security Agency. Prohibit federal employees from using taxpayer funding for union activities. $270 million annual savings. Reduce by 25% funding for the General Services Administration's Federal Building Fund, $10 billion annual cost, $2.5 billion annual savings. Sell access federal properties the government does not make use of, $3 billion annual savings. Eliminate taxpayer subsidies to climate change-related programs and funds, $800 million annual savings. decentralize, reframe, and reduce programs under the National and Community Services Act, such as the Corporation for National and Community Service, delegating volunteer network operations to local governments and nonprofits with federal support, serving more as a national volunteer hub. $1.1 billion annual cost, $550 million annual savings. Update the Sherman Act and strengthen the FTC's Federal Trade Commission Bureau of Competition to operate, investigate, and enforce cases of antitrust law violation. Ban the sharing of sensitive information of renters and apartment rent rates among competing landlords, which collectively increase rent prices. Possibly remove management software's capacity to provide recommendations through algorithmic pricing systems. General changes to the government and budget. Reform the salaries of Congress members, which is currently $174,000 minimum, to the following formula. The second previous year's federal national median salary index base, that is based on the national individual annual wages, which was $67,027 in 2024, plus a state median salary index supplement. This would give us the following equation: a base pay of $67,027 plus the respective state median per capita personal income. For example, Mississippi median personal income was $48,110, so Mississippi's Congress member's salary would be $115,137. Massachusetts median personal income was $87,812, so Massachusetts Congress member's salary would be $154,839. This formula isn't meant to specifically lower their pay, even though it does for all of them. Yay! Rather, it is meant to keep a strong symbolic link between Congress members and their constituents. They not only represent their states, but also the nation. If they want to earn more, they should promote and enact policies that would raise prosperity for the average citizen of their respective states and the nation as a whole. The most impactful policies to raise wages have already been mentioned earlier. Let me know what you think about this idea. Switch from paper-based processes to digitalized forms to reduce materials, staff hours, and operational costs, all to eliminate funding for congressional printing and binding. $40 billion in annual savings. Set term limits on Congress members for 2 consecutive terms. Congress members can run for more terms afterwards. This forces the system to bring new people into the political arena for Congress, but it also allows favorite Congress members who are beloved by citizens to continue serving in the future. Reduce the federal travel and conference spending in half. $4.6 billion annual cost, $2.3 billion annual savings. Make English the official language of the United States of America. Reduce the federal electric vehicle fleet spending by 50%. $770 million annual cost, $385 million annual savings. Ban political campaigns from receiving taxpayer funding. I'm not even going to waste my time explaining why we need this reform. Reduce the Corporation for Public Broadcasting subsidy by 1/3, $535 million annual cost, $175 million annual savings. Nullify or at least narrow down the decisions made in Citizens United versus FEC, SpeechNow.org versus FEC, and McCutcheon versus FEC. Require full and complete transparency with real-time disclosure of all political campaign financing. Eliminate non-individual donor anonymity and ban nonprofits from funding political candidates and campaigns. Ban corporate donations to political groups, elections, and candidates, since corporations are state-created entities and not individual citizens, and shareholders do not consent to using corporate funds for political use. Maybe we can allow corporations to engage in political spending if all shareholders unanimously approve. I don't think they should, but I don't mind compromising on that specific condition. Reform the USA Patriot Act by repealing bulk data collection of Section 215. Limit the power of national security letters by removing indefinite gag orders. Require FISA court transparency by allowing independent public advocates. declassifying important cases and reporting to Congress and the public, strengthen whistleblower protections and raise warrant standards to probable cause when Americans are involved. Also, justice for Edward Snowden. Reduce funding for federal regional commissions by 25%. $320 million annual cost, $80 million annual savings. Only count U.S. citizens and maybe legal residents in the census for representative apportionment. The fact that we're still counting illegal immigrants in our census, which gives a certain political party more representational power in Congress, is concerning. Remove the waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement of funding found in the Festivus reports compiled by Senator Rand Paul, the Federal Fumbles reports collected by Senator James Lankford, and the Make 'em Squeal reports written by Senator Joni Ernst. Remove the waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement of funding found in the Heritage Foundation's budget blueprint for fiscal year's policy proposals, in the Congressional Pig Books compiled by Citizens Against Government Waste, and the other wasteful spending and fraudulent crap uncovered in Where's the Pork? Oversight Reports by OpenTheBooks.com, and the reports made by the Project on Government Oversight. Review the findings and remove the waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement of funds found by the U.S. Government Accountability Office in their high-risk lists and annual reports, as well as each federal agency's Office of Inspectors General and the Pandemic Oversight Reports by the Pandemic Response Accountability Committee. Combine all the preventable waste and fraud collected by the senators, independent organizations, and public offices, and we get an estimated annual savings of at least $100 billion. Of course, we should review all their findings and see if there may be a few reported figures that have decent reason to exist, such as what the U.S. National Science Foundation may bring up. Illegalize elective abortion. Retain abortion for non-elective circumstances. Illegalize gender reassigning surgeries, aka body mutilation, for minors. Ban pornographic content and propaganda in schools and entertainment platforms. Eliminate the two-party system to become a multi-party system by switching the winner-take-all voting approach to proportional representation. Utilize ranked choice voting in larger districts and introduce fusion voting. These changes will give voters a real choice, provide a variety of representation, and reduce extreme polarization. Transform the plurality, majoritarian electoral system to a proportional representation system such as MMP, mixed member proportional, using ranked choice voting. This eliminates problems caused by redistricting, gerrymandering, extreme dichotomic polarization, and the limitation of a two-party system. When it comes to voting for political candidates, either remove the voting age requirement completely or increase it to be equal to whatever positions are on the ballot. For example, presidential candidates must be at least 35 years old. Therefore, people voting for a presidential candidate must also be at least 35 years old. If you don't know why this would be necessary, answer this question. Why does a candidate need to be at least 35 years old to run for President of the United States of America? And there's your answer. With regards to the general right to vote, only allow U.S. citizens with a voter ID to vote. To receive voter ID, any U.S. citizen, regardless of age, should pass an exam consisting of two components: English language proficiency and civics comprehension, testing the knowledge of U.S. history and government, similar to the naturalization tests taken by immigrants. Voter ID exams should not be mandatory for U.S. citizens. People who cannot pass basic English and U.S. civics tests should not have the right to vote, even if they are U.S. citizens. If you call me a sexist, racist, or ableist for this position, then you're only proving my point. If we can regulate and place limits on free speech, and if we can require citizens to pass background checks and go through training in order to exercise their constitutional right to keep and bear arms, then we most certainly can regulate the right to vote. Only U.S. citizens should be allowed to own land and real estate on U.S. soil. Legal residents may rent land and housing, but they must not be allowed to own it. Right now, 40 million acres of agricultural land is owned by foreign entities. I'm not talking about immigrants. I'm talking about non-American investors and companies based in other countries. 40 million acres. To put that in perspective, England has a surface area of 32 million acres. Washington state has a surface of 42 million acres. 40 million of acres of land in the USA is owned by foreign entities such as Canada, Netherlands, Italy, and China. Make Election Day a federal holiday. I'm not wasting my time explaining this one. Require every proposed bill to be limited to a single subject. Bills should only contain issues of the same subject. We will have no more of this combination of items within the same bill. Complex, multi-topic omnibus bills carrying sneaky rider provisions must stop now. This just confuses everybody. It makes voting on these issues unbelievably complicated, and it wastes everybody's time. Please support efforts such as passing the One Bill, One Subject Transparency Act. Reform and recalculate federal pensions for civilian employees. Try to cut back on federal pensions drastically. Former President Biden is set to receive the largest taxpayer-funded pension, estimated at about $417,000 per year. You want to tell me that this poor and decrepit man, sorry, that was inappropriate and inaccurate of me. You want to tell me that this rich and decrepit man is worth paying $417,000 every year just to see him walking on the beach trying not to fall down again after enacting policies that cause prices to go up by 22% across the country. And don't get me started on all the Congress members who also get huge pensions even though they commit insider trading, making millions of dollars during their short careers. Yeah, I think we need to cut federal pensions in half. In fact, why should they be on pensions when they could just be on Social Security? Each federal department's secretary must provide a monthly report to the public to list off all the accomplishments and progress made in the previous month and inform the public what further monthly goals they are striving for. No exceptions. Congress members should not be paid during a government shutdown and must not receive back pay for the duration of the government shutdown. Please support efforts such as the No Pay for Congress During Shutdown Act. Require insurance companies to semi-annually or annually update which healthcare providers accept their insurance if they provide a list of insured health providers. If they don't provide a list of covered health providers, then they are exempt from this rule. Eliminate all subsidies and grants to political think tanks, including but not limited to the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, the U.S. Institute of Peace, and the East-West Center. $76 million in annual savings. Estimated total annual economic savings, $1,006,408,000,000. And that's just the conservative minimum estimate. It could realistically well be double that amount. Tax system. Now, I hate taxes. Taxation should be on a voluntary basis and as minimal as possible. I would like to decrease taxes to oblivion. However, this section is mainly focused on adjusting the current tax system. I suggest the following tax system to be temporary repair to fix America given its current broken state. After about 20 years, the tax system would have to be significantly condensed. Here are the recommendations. Income tax. In a perfect world, get rid of it. But here's the most practical option. Have it only apply to income above $100,000, with brackets of 10% for income between $100,001 and $200,000, 20% between $200,001 and $300,000, 30% between $300,001 and $400,000, and 40% of income beyond $400,000. Eliminating almost all deductions, including the QBI deduction. Estimated tax revenue, $2 trillion. Capital gains tax. Have it taxed at the same rates as ordinary income, but instead of starting the brackets at $100,000, as we would with regular income, start it at 0. Also, capital losses should not be used as a deduction against regular income, that being wages and salaries. However, it may be deducted against capital gains. Estimated tax revenue, $355 billion. Payroll tax. If humans were smarter and wiser, we wouldn't need the services that payroll taxes fund. Here's the practical course. Eliminate the unemployment tax and Medicare tax. Leave only the Social Security tax, removing the employer portion and increasing the employee portion to 10%, and removing the $184,500 income cap, thereby allowing 100% of wage and salary income to be applicable to the Social Security tax. Reform the Social Security benefits formula. Just to skim the basic idea, first we average the income of the person's 15 highest earning years. Next, we use a multiplier of 2.5% times the number of covered years of work. These are years in which the person earned more than 25% of the national average wage, which for 2024 was $69,846. And so a covered year would have to earn at least 25% of that, or $17,461, to qualify for counting. Income earning less than the 25% threshold would qualify for half-year credit. Readjust the replacement bend points to 90% for the first $15,000, 40% following the income up to $85,000, and 10% for income beyond $85,000. Set the annual benefit maximum for a single individual to $60,000, making maximum monthly benefit $5,000. Revert the full retirement age back to 65. Tweak the actuarial adjustment schedule to reduce the benefit by 5% for every year prior to full retirement age and increase the benefit by 5% for every year after. Current Social Security benefit recipients should be grandfathered into the new system if their current benefits exceed what they would be getting under the new system. SSDI and SSI benefits would also be remodeled, but not as extensively as Social Security. Estimated tax revenue and relatively equal spending, $1.6 trillion. Corporate income tax. Reduce and eliminate as many corporate tax credits as possible. Limit and shorten depreciation schedules. Tighten language on deductions, and decrease corporate income tax rate down to 15%. Allow and promote full expensing of capital investment in the year in which it incurred, which will boost domestic R&D investments, instead of writing off business investments over multiple years. Estimated tax revenue, $500 billion. Establish a tax on offshoring and foreign outsourcing. Enact the HIRE Act or something similar. The Halting International Relocation of Employment Act, proposed by Ohio Republican Senator Bernie Moreno, would place a 25% tax on payments made by U.S. companies to foreign-based persons for labor or services. This will teach U.S. companies not to give away jobs that should go to U.S. Americans, incentivizing those U.S. corporations to hire and train domestically. It's basically a tariff, not on products, but on foreign labor. In my opinion, the tax should be between 100% and 340% for the first 20 years. Then it can drop down to 25% if politicians really want it to be 25%. If the corporations spend about $60 billion on foreign services and save between 50 to 70% on the cost of labor, then the HIRE Act would return an estimated income back to U.S. Americans of about $120 to $200 billion. Excise taxes. Eliminate it since its cost is only passed on to consumers, and the revenue would be replaced by a VAT. Estimated tax decrease, $100 billion. Estate and gift tax. Eliminate it because it barely brings any revenue and it goes against the American principle of private property rights. Estimated tax decrease, $30 billion. Customs duties, aka tariffs. This tax is not meant to be a reliable source of tax revenue, rather it is an international bargaining tool. We should implement a true high-ceiling reciprocal tariff with no minimum tariff rate. This means that we apply a tariff on all goods from a country with the tariff's rate equal to that of the country's highest tariff on U.S. products. If country A imposes 3 tariffs on US products of 5%, 20%, and 50%, then the US should tax all of country A products at 50%. If country B imposes no tariffs on US products, then the US should not tariff country B's products. If country A decreases its highest tariff of 50% down to, say, 30%, the US will decrease its tariff rate on that country's goods to 30%. Estimated tax revenue, $700 billion in the first year, then that would likely decrease to about $300 billion a year. Value-added tax. Implement a nationwide consumption-based VAT with a rate between 10 to 15% on all consumable goods except for education, healthcare, charitable donations, and state and local governments. Estimated tax revenue, $1 trillion. State income tax. Model it after the federal version, but with significantly smaller rates. Better yet, get rid of state income tax and either implement a state retail sales tax or increase the existing sales tax rate. Local property tax. I think I speak on behalf of 99% of US Americans when I say get rid of it. Why on earth am I paying a tax on something I own? The best replacement would be either a land value tax or enacting increasing local sales tax. Either one is way better than the current property tax system we have now. Finally, repeal all personal tax credits, most tax deductions such as the qualified business income deduction, while retaining and tightening the rules for charitable deductions. Repeal the alternative minimum tax and repeal the head of household filing status. Of course, I will go into greater detail with each category and their respective issues in future videos. I believe these policies reflect the America First spirit. I understand some of these policies sound too conservative and others too progressive. I, at this point in time, believe that there are good, strong reasons to support each of these policies with compelling evidence of effective results, all the while respecting fundamental individual rights and simultaneously promote the general welfare of all the people of the United States, which will drive us closer to becoming a more perfect union. With all that said, I would like to know your thoughts on these issues. I'm genuinely interested. I don't have all the answers, which is why I spent the last 2 years preparing for this video, studying well over 100 different think tanks and research organizations across the entire political spectrum to gain as much understanding of the economic, political, ethical, and practical possibilities. Which ideas do you think I'm going too far on? Which ones am I not going far enough? And which ones would you approach in a completely different way? Leave a comment on your thoughts and your reasons. If you enjoyed brainstorming and world building, leave a like and share with your friends. Ask them how they would approach these issues. If you watched the whole video, congratulations! Now, if you agreed with some, if not many, if not all, of the policies I've mentioned and you're wondering how we could turn this into reality, here are a few practical ways to accomplish these goals. 1. Educate yourself further on these issues by studying economics, statistics, and understanding the laws relevant to these issues. Analyze the sources I've presented and come to your own conclusions. Learn whether there are other angles to approach these policies. 2. Raise awareness of these policy reforms by sharing this video on social media. 3. Contact your elected officials or their staff by email or scheduling meetings with them. You can find your representatives by going to pluralpolicy.com/findyourlegislature or congress.gov/members. Remember, elected officials respond better to organized and respectful constituents, clear and actionable requests, and when providing strong evidence and social support with personal stories. 4. Involve yourself locally by attending city council, school board, and zoning meetings. Join a local advocacy group or nonprofit. Volunteer for a candidate's campaign. Join your local political party clubs and discuss policies. 5. With enough education, experience, and organizing skills, you may be able to create your own political group, start fundraising, build a local base of supporters, and run for office. If Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez can do it, so can you. I now leave you with a quote from Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step." And also liking this video, commenting your thoughts below, and sharing this with all your friends. Thank you.